And what he found was about 90% of the things he was worried about had resolved themselves. So Norman Vincent Peale asked him, he said, what about the other 10%? He goes, I'll put them back in the box for next week. But you know, there really are ways that we can make our life what we want it to be and not get stuck. And I think humor is always one that helps us move forward. He also did one more thing. When he walked to the office, he actually had 13 steps he would go up. It was kind of like a big entrance. And on each step, every morning, he would stop for a minute and say a short prayer. So by the time he got to the office, he was what we call prayed up. And all that knowing the truth works, whether it's you're aware of it instantly or it subtly is happening. As religious scientists, we know we can do prayer treatment to find our way out of worry, and doing it works. Well, what about a situation in life where someone feels lonely? There was a woman who went to Norman Vincent Peale and she said, I feel like I'm in jail. She said, it's a jail of loneliness. My husband's died. I have no work. And she said, you know, I only have a few friends. My daughters live in a different city. And she said, my friends really don't have time for me, and I don't blame them because I'm really not very interesting. I never went to college, you know, and she basically just stayed at home all the time. And Norman said, well, you know who has the key to the jail, don't you? And she goes, not really. He goes, you do. And so he told her, because she didn't know about prayer treatment, he told her to visualize herself as being the interesting, loving, happy kind of woman she wanted to be, to invite her friends out to lunch and seeing them inviting her back. And soon as she practiced this change of mind, her life changed. You've heard it over and over again. Change your thinking, change your life. Because God has to obey what we believe. And if we believe nobody wants to be around us, guess what? Nobody wants to be around us. And if we believe we're interesting, she actually started to get more interesting. She started to learn things. She started to volunteer. And then she's convincing herself even more than the universe, right? For once you're convinced, the universe just obeys. You've also heard treat and move your feet. So treat, do the prayer treatment, change the idea, and then be open to any movement you need to make it happen. The great thing is, change can happen quickly or slowly. For this woman, it was more of a gradual change. But sometimes the change is immediate. And you know, I look at children because I think they're such great teachers. I see why Jesus said, be like the little children. They still remember the truth of themselves so clearly. But you look at children and they're playing and all of a sudden they get mad at each other. And then 30 seconds later, they're playing happily again. You know, it's like change is that fast. It's almost like if you have, you've cut some beautiful flowers and they're starting to droop because, oh, you forgot to water them. You put a little more water in and in a very short time, they're revitalized. I actually, one time, cut my hand. I closed the car door on it, a lovely thing to do. And it wasn't a major cut, but it hurt a lot. And so I did treatment. And then it was a time when I was having some people over for breakfast. So I'm like, okay, I don't have time. I did treatment. I soaked my hand in a little cold water for a little bit, and then I go, okay, I've got to get the breakfast going. So by the time I had the breakfast done, I looked at my hand. The cut was healed. It can happen that fast. I told you before about Greg Braden, who wrote the Divine Matrix, how he was going all over the world looking for examples of people doing healings. And he was invited to a healing clinic that was run by people who were sort of like monks. And there was a woman who had inoperable cancer and in her bladder. And so he invited, the owner of the clinic invited Greg, when he asked about the healing they used, to come. He said, we're going to heal this woman. And so they laid her on the table, and they actually had a sonogram so he could see the bladder and he could see the tumor, you know, kind of vibrating. And the monks, the healers, stood around her and chanted. And all of a sudden, he saw the tumor vibrate, and it popped out. It was gone. He saw it with his own eyes. There was another man there too who witnessed it. And he asked the healer afterwards, what were the monks saying? And he said it's the equivalent of not so, not so. So they're denying the circumstance as something that has to stay. Like we're told, do denial if you need to, if you can't move right to the truth. And they're knowing the truth that this woman was designed as healthy, whole, and complete, and that's the truth of her again. So it can happen in a moment or over a period of time. Now, when you think about jumping, I think it'd be hard to jump high if I'm carrying a lot of baggage, right? So maybe instead of baggage that are suitcases, maybe my baggage is anger and resentment or feeling hurt. That's just as heavy as some real heavy suitcases. It's real hard to jump into a new delightful experience if I'm stuck in anger and hurt. Well, it was interesting. There's a dear friend who gives me books occasionally, and he gave me a book called The Gift of Forgiveness. And a man, Oliver Clerc, I don't know if I said it right, who's French, he had gone to Don Miguel Ruiz's workshops. And Don Miguel Ruiz was the one who wrote the Four Agreements. And in this workshop, Oliver was told that what he needed to do to move forward in life was to get down on his knees. There were 20 people in the workshop, and ask each one of them to forgive him. Now, of course, you know, he didn't even know these people, right? He's thinking, this is pretty strange, but he did it. And he said an amazing thing happened.